for taking the appropriate action if you do not want to be included in this recorded information session. All remarks are on the record and for attribution. With the signing of the bipartisan infrastructure law by President Biden, Reclamation takes on a new opportunity to invest in our infrastructure and benefit the American public for the next generation. A great deal of activity is well underway across Reclamation as we prepare to implement the law. We have established a team to lead implementation and develop a plan that outlines how Reclamation will implement the law. These information sessions are designed to inform you and address your questions. We'll provide updates today that will address our mission areas. Topics will include authorization and appropriation of funds, rural water, critical maintenance and aging infrastructure, use of coronavirus funds, and the Indian Water Rights Settlement Completion Fund. We plan on addressing as many questions as possible during the question and answer period. Updated information about Reclamation's implementation of the law is always available at usbr.gov/BIL, BIL. And feel free to submit your questions and comments to usbr.bil, BIL at usbr.gov, and we'll work to address your questions. We also have a growing list of frequently asked questions, and we hope that resource is helpful. We're committed to transparency throughout this process and appreciate your support of this historic opportunity to improve our nation's water infrastructure. At this time, it is my honor to welcome Commissioner Camille Kalimlim-Tootin for opening remarks.
Thank you, sir, and good morning to everyone and Happy New Year. One of the things that we will celebrate this year, along with the implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law, is our 120th anniversary for the Bureau of Reclamation. And so as we look through this year, we look forward to working with all of you as we work through implementation of the law, certainly operations within this year's hydrology, and certainly answering your questions along the way. Today, our discussion will be led by our Programs and Budget Director, Bob Wolf, and our Policy and Programs Director, Chris Beardsley. So I'd like to turn it over to them at this point, but also thank our project management implementation team for the significant work that they've done thus far. Our anticipation is that you will see our spend plan later this month and look forward to the continued conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Tootin. We will now receive an update on our implementation plan, and I'm honored to introduce Reclamation's Director of Program and Budget, Mr. Bob Wolf.
Thank you, Rob. And welcome everyone to today's session on the bipartisan infrastructure law. As Rob and the Commissioner mentioned, I am Bob Wolf, Reclamation's Director of Program and Budget in Washington, D.C. The Program and Budget Office advises the Commissioner and works with the administration on development of the annual President's budget for Reclamation. Program and Budget then supports the Commissioner and Department in supporting the budget during congressional consideration of Reclamation's budget, and ultimately supports the implementation of the funding after Congress passes the appropriation bill. We are thrilled to participate and play a role in implementing the bipartisan infrastructure law. These funds, which are over and above Reclamation's regular annual appropriations, provide a generational opportunity to invest in the nation's water-related resources and infrastructure. Today, we will provide an overview of the funding categories authorized for funding in Title IX, the Western Water Infrastructure, and Division J, which appropriates funds for these categories. Melissa Smith from the Program and Budget Office in a few minutes will provide that information. We will then discuss several provisions in the infrastructure law not covered in the previous two sessions. These include construction funding for rural water projects, which is Title IX, Section 40901, Part 3, aging infrastructure, which is 40901, Part 2, and use of coronavirus funds, which is a special section in 40910. We will also highlight the department's plans for consulting with tribes on Division G for the Indian Water Rights Settlements Completion Fund. This will be part of a larger consultation covering all programs for which the Department of the Interior received funding in the infrastructure law. As noted in the previous sessions, Reclamation will be using existing programs and procedures to the extent possible and look for ways to streamline delivery. There are, of course, new programs and or competitive programs that require additional steps before the award of funding to recipients. We look forward to engaging with you today and in the future as Reclamation undertakes this tremendous opportunity to invest in the nation's future. I would like to introduce Carrie Durall, who is program analyst, or I'm sorry, I'm going to introduce Melissa Smith, who is a program analyst in Reclamation's Program and Budget Office, to give the overview in section 40901. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Melissa Smith, and I'm going to talk this morning about section 40901 and division J of the law. Section 40901 provides the authorization to conduct the activities as outlined in the 12 listed subsections. And this is important because, next slide, with every authorization, we need an accompanying appropriation to move forward with any activity. Division J provides the appropriation for each category in amounts equal to the amount authorized in section 40901. In total, the $8.3 billion appropriated will be given to Reclamation over the course of 5 years in the amount of $1.66 billion per year. A key point to understand is that while $1.66 billion is 20% of the total amount, the funding will not be allocated at 20% per category per year. Reclamation will design a spend plan for each $1.66 billion each year that aligns funding to best meet the ability for each fiscal year and balances future planning. Next slide. On your screen is the continuation of the amounts provided in Division J for each subsection. And again, they match the amounts provided in section 40901. Next slide. Division J also gave administration provisions and reporting requirements. The law provides up to 3% annually for administration and policy costs associated with implementation. There will not be one spend plan for the entire $8.3 billion. As I said, there will be annual spend plans, and the first spend plan for FY22 outlining the first allocation of $1.66 billion is due 60 days after enactment of the law, which is next week. The spend plan will be posted on our website as soon as possible after transmittal to Congress. For fiscal years 2023 through 2026, the annual spend plan is to accompany the submission of the President's budget. Due to the process involved with determining projects for each category, the projects and locations may not be provided with the spend plan, but they will be provided as they are known. For reporting, Congress has also asked that no later than 120 days after enactment, we will provide a monthly report to the committees on appropriations detailing the allocation and obligations of the funding provided in the law. I hope you found this information helpful, and I look forward to your questions at the end. I will turn my time back over to Bob Wolf. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa, for that presentation. And next, I'd like to turn to Carrie Durall, who is a program analyst in Reclamation's Planning and Economics Group, to discuss construction funding for rural water projects. Thanks, Carrie.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to briefly share this information with you today. I see we're on the right slide. As Bob said, I am going to be presenting on section 40901, specifically subsection 3 of the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. And what this subsection does is authorizes $1 billion for rural water projects that the law notes have been authorized by an act of Congress prior to July 1 of 2021, and in accordance with the Reclamation Rural Water Supply Act of 2006. Reclamation will apply this funding to advance construction completion of 7 authorized rural water projects. These projects are Garrison Diversion Unit of the Pixelone Missouri Basin Program, Fort Peck Reservation Dry Prairie Rural Water System, the Rocky Boys North Central Montana Rural Water System, Lewis and Clark Rural Water System, Eastern New Mexico Rural Water Supply Project, the Hickoria Apache Rural Water System, and Musselshell Judith Rural Water System. To allocate this funding for construction between those authorized rural water supply projects, Reclamation will consider each of these projects' individual capabilities, phasing, completion schedules, stakeholder work priorities, as well as a prioritization criteria. The Rural Water Supply Act of 2006 instructed Reclamation to develop that prioritization criteria, and that was first published in Appendix A of the Rural Water Assessment Report sent to Congress in 2014. With that, I thank you for your time and look forward to your questions at the end of our presentation, and I will turn things back over to you, Bob.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. I'd like to next introduce Scott Hutchins from Reclamation's Contracts and Repayments Office.
Good morning, thanks, Bob. This section of the law, 40901-2, puts $3.2 billion into the Aging Infrastructure Account, which is an account that was created by law just over a year ago and is used to fund aging infrastructure, specifically what we call extraordinary maintenance or XM activities. There are 2 subsections to this part of the law, which devote $100 million each to more specific projects under limited criteria. We're still working to identify those. But the most important part is that there's $3 billion available over the next several years to fund XM activities across reclamation and reclamation projects. Next slide, please. In order to access funds from this new account, an application process is required by law, and Congress directed Reclamation to create that process and carry it out beginning in FY22, fiscal year 22. We've done that. I'll go into details in a second about what that application process looks like, but we are carrying it out this year, and we will be doing it at least once per year going forward, which is another requirement of the law. Reclamation looks at this as an addition to our regular appropriations and regular appropriation process, as well as the quote old process for applying for extraordinary maintenance funds. Nothing in the application process limits Reclamation from continuing that under that authority, which has been in place since 2009. The application process that we've developed is described in one of our Reclamation Manual documents, Directives and Standard called PEC 0503. That document's been under major revisions for several months, and we're nearly complete with that following public comment, which closed last month. And the final document will be posted in the coming weeks. Next slide. I'm going to briefly describe what the application process looks like. Throughout the year, and then by a specified date, Reclamation staff will collaborate with our transferred work operators and project beneficiaries who have a share of the reimbursable part of the operation maintenance or O&M expenses on a project. In that process, they'll determine whether the project or work is eligible under the authority as XM, what the scope of the work is, how much it's going to cost, and what federal funds are being requested out of the account. At the close of the application period, the region staff will send those applications up to the commissioner through Denver and DC offices, which will analyze each application. The close of the application period also marks the beginning of a required 90-day turnaround time. Congress directed Reclamation to report to them within 90 days after the close of each application period. So in that process, the commissioner will review and either approve or modify each application, and will send that report to Congress. Shortly thereafter, when we're acting on appropriations, specifically this $3 billion from the infrastructure law, we can move quickly to initiate XM projects. That's it for me. Back to you, Bob.
Thanks, Scott. And our next presenter is Carter Brown, the Department of the Interior's Associate Solicitor for Water. Carter will discuss Section 40910 regarding the use of coronavirus funds. Go ahead, Carter.
Good morning, and thanks a lot, Bob. We just wanted to flag this specific provision for our stakeholders because it is an amendment to the American Rescue Plan Act. After Congress passed that law, we received questions about the applicability or the use of those dollars to meet the non-federal cost share for reclamation projects. At the time, we said no, and folks went back to Congress and asked for this amendment. And so this amendment addresses that question. I also want to flag for folks that in May 17th of last year, the Department of Treasury put out an interim final rule addressing some questions about the use of those dollars. Some of you may have commented on it. I heard from Treasury yesterday that it looks like the final rule will be coming out, I would guess, sometime next week. And that new final rule will have an expansion of the use of those dollars to include reclamation, certain reclamation projects or certain reclamation programs. So we just want to flag that for you as well. We will post both the interim final rule and the final rule when that comes out on the law website, or the reclamation's website for the infrastructure law. And that's it, and happy to ask you questions when we wrap up. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for that presentation, Carter. And then I would finally like to highlight Division G, which established the Indian Water Rights Settlement Completion Fund. As promised, I will highlight the department's plan for tribal consultation, which is part of that Division G, is related to Division G. Division G of the infrastructure law established the fund. It provides $2.5 billion in mandatory funds for Indian water rights settlements enacted by Congress as of November 15th, 2021. So that's the date that the infrastructure law was signed. The funds deposited in the account are available for use by the Secretary of the Interior to satisfy obligations under authorized settlements through transfer of funds to accounts authorized to receive discretionary appropriations. The funds are available without further action by Congress and are available until expended. And it was actually a lump sum of $2.5 billion that's deposited in the new account. The department recently announced tribal consultation will occur on the infrastructure law. This will be part of a department-wide consultation. The sessions are scheduled for January 26th, 27th, and 28th. Additional information on the consultation and links to register for the consultations can be found on the DOI upcoming consultation website, as well as the BIA consultation website. So I have put a link in the slide here for that presentation, and you can also find it just by going to the department's webpage and finding it there. So Rob, maybe we'll want to post that in the chat at some point so that people have direct access to it. We now have time for any questions that you may have, and for that I will turn back to Rob Manning. Rob will be joined by Peter Soeth again from Public Affairs to give more details about the logistics of the Q&A portion of the session.
Thank you, and thanks to all of our presenters. We'll certainly put that information in the chat here. At this time, we'll address your questions about how Reclamation will implement the bipartisan infrastructure law. Please raise your hand using the hand icon at the top of the screen and state your name and affiliation when asking a question. Or you can submit your question by sending an email to usbr.bil@usbr.gov. We're committed to addressing as many questions as we can during this limited time today. So with that, let's go to your questions. Peter?
We're still waiting on some questions to come in at this time.
Okay.
Once again, if you have any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand.
And again, you can submit your questions via email to usbr.bil@usbr.gov. And we do have a growing list of frequently asked questions that we hope is helpful as well. from our previous sessions. Okay.
Just so everyone's aware, I did put the link to the tribal consultation sessions in the chat. So those are available there. And I just put the email where you may submit the questions. Rob, I do have a question that came in through chat.
Okay.
Someone, they would like a little more detail on the approach on water reuse and recycling.
Okay, that was covered in a previous session, but we can certainly try to address that here. Dean Maroney, are you on? Or Dave Rath?
I can take that.
Okay.
I am here.
There is our chief engineer. Great, thank you. Dr. Raff.
I'm looking for the question, sorry.
Title 16 water recycling, our process there for the bill that was covered in session 1.
Thanks. So we have our existing program in Title 16 and water reuse. The bill did include, in addition to that, large-scale recycling projects. We will be utilizing our existing programs for Title 16 for the bipartisan infrastructure law, with some updates on notice of funding opportunities that are in development right now. So be looking for that. And then a little bit after the Title 16 will be the large-scale recycling projects. That is a new authority that will take a little bit more time to develop that program, but be looking for public notice and public comments coming up over the next year or so, I would imagine.
Dr. Raff, thank you so much. And Dr. Raff is, as stated, our chief engineer. And our previous sessions are recorded and available on our website at usbr.bil at usbr.gov. So you can view those previous sessions as well. But thank you, Dr. Raff. Any additional questions, Peter?
Yeah, I have a question. Rachel Ramirez is asking what Reclamation is doing to shore up reservoirs in the West, given the long-term drought consequences.
I can take that if that's helpful. And Dr. Raff, happy to get your guidance on that. Certainly, we are watching the hydrology as close as anyone else. We have seen significant snowpack within the Sierras and certainly some improvements within the Colorado River Basin, among others. A good way to talk about this is, if you look at not necessarily having a paycheck for a year and then all of a sudden having 1 month of a paycheck, your bank account is still below. And that's the way that you can think about our hydrology and our capacities and our carryover storage in the reservoirs. So one of the things that we immediately announced, at least within the Colorado River Basin, is our partnership with the basin states and our tribal communities on the 500,000 plus plan, which would be conserving 500,000 acre feet over the span of 2 years to be able to shore up levels at Lake Mead and certainly help the Colorado River Basin as a whole. And there's activities across the board on that. There's ways that we're looking at that Dr. Raff can touch on how we enhance our forecasting and really get a handle on water supply. But certainly the success to managing our infrastructure and our reservoirs is in our partnerships with you and in the activities that we take throughout this year, but also in the implementation of the infrastructure law in building resiliency in the future. So stay tuned. There's a lot of active activities that I know some of you are already engaged with us on, and thank you for that. But there's certainly more to do, and with the resources in the infrastructure law, we have the ability to back those up.
Thank you, Commissioner Tootin.
Just a reminder, if you have a question, please raise your hand. It'll notify us that you have a question and we'll unmute you so you could ask that question. I have a question for Scott Hutchins from Ruth Ann Kelly from the city of Clovis. Do the extraordinary maintenance projects include the replacement of clay piping with PVC?
Hi, thanks for the question. I'm not an expert in the details of that type of work. I'd encourage you first to reach out to your local area office to look into the details of that. But I will say that if it meets the basic criteria of what defines an XM project, then it certainly could apply. Just real quickly, that's major non-recurring maintenance of a mission critical asset. The purpose is to continue to provide project benefits, needs to be greater than 10% of the O&M budget and $100,000, and it can't be dam safety. This obviously would not be a dam safety project, but so long as it meets those criteria, that definition, then it would be eligible. And again, reiterate to reach out to your local area office, and they can collaborate with you to determine if it is eligible and move forward with an application.
Thank you, Scott.
Scott and or Dave, if it does not apply for extraordinary maintenance, would there be other programs that they might be interested in looking at?
I defer to Dave. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Without knowing the specifics, I would just highlight a number of our water smart programs. Perhaps one to explore would be water and energy efficiency grants. If there is an energy or efficiency nexus, that might be somewhere to look. We do have a webpage for all of that we can try to link to the BIL webpage as well, maybe just to help with the one-stop shopping. And again, just to reiterate Scott's comments, your area office will be a great resource as well to tap into all of what Reclamation is up to with the BIL and without. So one thing to look at, water smart, water and energy efficiency grants. And otherwise, as Scott said, please stay in constant communication with your area office.
I have a question from Garrett Altman. Garrett, please unmute yourself and share your organization.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Garrett Altman. I'm with the Santa Clara Pueblo Forestry Department. We're a small federally recognized tribe in northern New Mexico. And one of the biggest limitations we have at looking at some of these infrastructure bill opportunities is really coming up with cost match to support the scale of projects that we have in mind and would like to pursue. We're really looking at more of Section 40907 and looking at some of our watershed level treatments and looking at alternatives to rebuilding dams that were recently breached during debris flows following wildfire, and looking at alternatives such as off-channel oxbow ponds and increasing both surface and subsurface water storage. And really it comes down to cost share, and being a small tribe with limited resources, are there any opportunities or options for tribes to apply for cost match waivers or assistance with some of these grants? And if that can be considered during the development, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
And David, I think the 40907 is the multi-benefit watershed health improvement category.
I appreciate those comments very much. As all of these programs are developed, and there will be an opportunity for folks to review and provide input as well. So please continue to provide those types of comments, and appreciate that very much.
Thank you very much.
Peter, do we have additional questions?
John Loving, please go ahead and unmute yourself and share your organization.
Good morning. My name's John Loving. I work with the Navajo agricultural products industry. And I just wanted to ask, we talked a lot about this funding. What can be utilized by NAPI for projects at the Navajo Indian Irrigation Project and just basically other Indian irrigation projects? I know we talked about critical infrastructure failure, but I just wanted to make that inquiry and get clarification on what, if in this funding, would we be able to utilize if we wanted to apply.
Yeah, I think, as you know, the NAPI project is the Indian Irrigation Project is a Bureau of Indian Affairs project. That Reclamation has obviously worked very closely with BIA with respect to that project. And that's something that there'll be an opportunity with the consultation the end of January to certainly explore that more in depth as part of that consultation. And we are working very closely with BIA to try to make sure that we leverage resources and look appropriately about what resources are available across Interior to try to address issues.
Yes, this is Beth Hughes Brown. I'm one of the folks that is attempting to implement the BIL for Reclamation. A couple of you have asked really excellent questions that are very detailed. We want to encourage you to send them to us in an email, usbr.bill@usbr.gov. Just in case you don't have the actual expert who can address your question on the call today. As you know, this is one of 3 sessions. And the experts, perhaps to answer the question you asked, were on one of the first 2. So please feel free to use that, and we will try to connect you with the folks who can directly address your questions. You're asking great questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, for that clarification. You're exactly right. Please, we encourage you to submit your questions by sending an email to usbr.bill@usbr.gov. Additional questions here?
We have a couple questions here. Edward Manuel, please unmute yourself and share your organization.
Yeah, Edward Manuel.
Mr.
You may have lost him there.
There you go. You're unmuted now.
Okay. Edward Manuel from Stone Awesome Nation here in Arizona. We have a water settlement that was settled back in 1982, 40 years ago. And there was a cooperative fund that was established, and the local organizations contributed money into it. And the federal government never put sufficient funding, their portion of sufficient funding to fund the cooperative fund. So there's a chance that the money's going to run out next year. So that's we're trying to find out if that funding will be reestablished by the federal government to refund that cooperative fund.
Sir, we don't know whether we have the right expert on the call for exactly the question that you just asked. We will get you that information to the best of our capability. Can you send it in an email to that address that you see on the page, usbr.bil@usbr.gov? You may be aware that there's some additional funding for tribes in the Build Back Better bill, which has not yet been enacted. And so we will keep you in mind for that as well, but please send us your question so we can address it fully via email. Thank you, sir.
Will do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Gordon Kinney, please unmute yourself and share your organization.
Good morning. My name is Gordon Kenny. I work on behalf of the San Carlos Apache tribe. And I had a couple of different questions. As you probably know, the San Carlos Apache tribe has a water rights settlement as well. and we've been working with BOR to implement that water rights settlement. My one question I had was regarding the 8.3 billion over 5 years. First question would be, I guess just kind of an implementation part of this. I guess it was noted that, this 8.3 billion would be doled out at about 1.66 billion annually, but perhaps it wouldn't be done by, whatever the percentage was by the accounts. I guess, how are you determining, what accounts you'll fund that year in additional kind of funding is one question. And then as a tribal water rights settlement tribe, I'm assuming that, the tribe could be eligible for this funding as well to match potentially with some of their water rights settlement funding as well. But I just wanted to kind of clarify that with you all as well, that, water rights settlement tribes would be eligible for this other funding as well. And then my last question has to do with the water rights settlement fund as well. You noted that there's consultations at the end of the month, but I was wondering if there's been any other kind of longer term timeline that has been laid out on how funding for water rights settlements, at least through the BOR, how that would play out as well.
It's completion fund. I was mentioned that Liz Klein in the Office of Secretary is the main point of contact and the senior person with respect to water rights settlements. And she will be working with the Secretary's Indian Water Rights Office, and they in turn with Reclamation and Bureau of Indian Affairs on advice on anything related to our input on how to allocate those funds. But obviously the consultation with the tribes is a critical part of that process. And of course, that opportunity we mentioned is the end of January. And it's something where that is a lump sum, that $2.5 billion. So that's something where it does not have the same limitation of each of 5 years being doled out in increments, but there'll be a whole process to decide how to best address that. With respect to the other 8.3 million, I think I saw Melissa Smith join to try to help answer that question.
Good morning. In respect to how the decisions are going to be made, you're really referring to the spend plan. And what I had referenced was that those decisions are going to be made based upon ability. And the example that I would give you is right now for FY22, we will spend some time standing up the aquatic ecosystem restoration program. So it doesn't quite make sense to allocate funding to that program whenever it's not quite ready to start expenditure. So that funding will just kind of be tabled a little bit, but we have other activities such as rural water, which might be more ready to spend funding immediately in FY22. So all of this is being staged so that we can maximize being able to obligate quickly, being able to maximize our planning, and be able to give some room to grow into some of the programs that were authorized. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you. Have a question from Daniel Preston. If you could unmute and share your organization.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you very much. Daniel Preston here, Donna Autumn Nation. Councilman Manuel had mentioned our settlement regarding the Swarsa settlement. Just an intro again. Thank you for holding this session. You know, the Donna Autumn Nation was particularly pleased to see that the 2.5 billion Indian Water Rights Settlement Completion Fund was included as part of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so we're pleased that we're having this discussion today. And as you may know, that our settlement is 40 years old, and we're still, as Councilman Manuel mentioned, to indemnify our settlement with the cooperative fund. And so I just have two questions. When I heard a date at the end of January, and then the tribal consultation, which is muchly greatly appreciated. And so when is the distribution? What does that timeline look like when these funds are going to be distributed?
That will really be the Office of Secretary will have the lead on that. So I can't speak on their behalf, but I know that they are interested, as we all are, in being successful in implementation of the law and providing the funding as quickly as possible, but making sure that we make smart decisions on how we do that, and that we accommodate as best we can all of the settlements that have funding requirements.
Okay, thank you. That would be good to know as soon as that's available. And then my second question, I take it the guidelines are not finalized as far as what is allowable through these funds. I mean, I know it's pretty straightforward, but the guidelines are not finalized just yet, correct? Without the consultation?
Yeah, let me try that one. This is Beth Hughes Brown. The guidelines, that's a complicated question that you just asked. Guidelines are finalized for many of our programs, the programs that have been in existence and operational for a number of years. So their guidelines are in place. A lot of them do have eligibility for tribes. So that is something we will provide more information on as we get it. So you can certainly apply under a lot of our existing programs. For others, where they are brand new programs, we are setting up the eligibility and the criteria and so on for most of them, but a lot of them are legislated. The criteria are legislated. So it will be whatever the law says for that particular program. Finally, as far as criteria for divvying up the money, that is a separate thing, and we have to go through processes for each of those. So each of them will take a slightly different timeline to get to the end result. I apologize that I can't give you more exact information on that, but that's kind of the state of the art. Do you have any follow-up questions?
No, just a comment. Yes, thank you for that response. And as far as what that timeline looks like to help us prepare for the Tohono O'odham Nation would be greatly appreciated. So thank you very much. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Okay. Do we have any additional questions?
We had one question in chat from Gordon Kinney. Can you confirm that tribes with water settlements are also eligible for funding part of their projects through some of these other accounts that could be paired with the water settlement funding?
Yeah, I think we would have to look at the specifics. I mean, tribes as a general matter are obviously eligible for a large number of the programs that are part of the 8.3 billion. Water Smart, for example, is one where we know that tribes have been successful in applying and receiving funds through that program. The rural water category that was discussed today, there are a number of reservations that are being served through those rural water projects, and we have that $1 billion there. When you get into the specifics of a settlement, I think we would have to work with the local office and the water rights office and evaluate that specific situation.
Thank you, Bob. We will post the email inside our chat that you can submit questions to. Just for everybody on, that email address is usbr.bil@usbr.gov, G-O-V, usbr.bil@usbr.gov. And That is now in the chat. Okay. Do we have any additional questions?
I do
Bob, I
have
just want-
one more
Peter?
question. I do have one
Peter,
question from Chuck Jacobs. Chuck, if you could unmute yourself and share your organization.
Thank you. This is Chuck Jacobs. I work with for the Oglala Sioux tribe. I'm the director of the Mini-Wachoni distribution system on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. I've got two questions. The Mini-Wachoni system is over 20, 30 years old now. And so the original portions are aged, and we're spending a lot of our funds on repairing those aged systems, those aged portions of the Mini-Wachoni. Are these funds going to be, are those replacing the aging systems? Is that eligible for the XM funds?
I would certainly encourage you to work with the area office and in the regional office, and I would expect that it would be a good candidate for that. Dave Raff is on, and I know with the technical service center that is under his office, they're very well aware of some of the issues on the project and are trying to work very hard to work through that. Do you have any comments you want to provide on that, David?
Yeah, the Mini-Wachoni project, particularly some of the pipe issues that have taken place recently, is something that we are very aware of, very actively working to try to address. The Technical Service Center here in Denver has put a lot of effort in working with the local entities there as well to identify the causes of the pipe issues and to come up with solutions. And that's something that we're working at here at Reclamation throughout the levels of our organization to try to address. In terms of funding, as Bob mentioned, please work with the area office in terms of applicability there.
I've also got a second question. The final engineering report that determined the construction throughout the years, now that the construction is complete, the final engineering report underbuilt the system. We've had major projects that we've built and connected to the Mini-Wachoni over that 20, 30 year process or lifespan. And so there's areas in the construction that were underbuilt. So I guess the question is, can these funds be used to increase the capacity of Mini-Wachoni in those areas where it was underbuilt? And the demand is exceeding our capabilities.
Yeah, I think as Beth Hughes Brown in our office mentioned a couple times, if you send that question in, we can try to take a more careful look at it and address it. Obviously, there were parameters in the authorizing legislation, and the authorization for appropriations has expired. And of course, the authorization had a general plan, but we can look at that more carefully. I will say that in our drought funding that we did a reprogramming in 2021, and then we got supplemental funds in the continuing resolution early in 2022. We did look at storage tanks for the project. So we had one storage tank that we provided funding for out of the reprogramming for drought. And then we have 2 additional storage tanks that are being funded out of the continuing resolution supplemental funds. So we're hopeful that that helps with the project water supply and being resilient with some of the issues that you're experiencing. I'm not sure it gets to the full point that you're making as far as the number of households and how the engineering plan addressed the population.
Yeah, I think it's not just the reservoirs, it's the pipe in the ground was undersized. And so that's an issue that needs to be looked at in about 3 or 4 different areas on the reservation.
Okay, yeah, if you send those questions in, we'll make sure that we work with the region area office and try to address those. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have one more question. LM, if you could unmute and share your name and organization.
Okay, thank you, sir. My name is Larry Morset. I represent the Chippewa Cree Tribe in the North Central Water Project that we're doing here. And this is kind of springboarding off of the Pine Ridge question there. Our FER back in the day was basically underdeveloped also. And over the years, since our project was approved back in, I think, 2002, was actually approved, we've received minimal funding to do the project. And right now we're in midstream. And we've had to downsize our project over the years to try to keep under the cap, which basically means we had to redesign our whole water treatment project plant out at the site. And we redesigned and we're staying under the cap. But over the year, inflationary pressures, especially recently, we've seen a basically increase in prices, especially in pipe prices. And I guess my question would be, is there any means by which we can apply for repricing or maybe increase indexing evaluations on this to recoup some of our funding that we lost? And what I'm referring to that is most of our funding is now allocated toward the actual main project, which is the water treatment plant and pipe to our reservation, which is about 60 miles away. And that gives us a big loss on our on-reservation costs. So we're probably down 20-30 million from what we anticipated in the beginning. So I guess my question would be, is there any way to apply to this new funding if we're repriced on some of our project to basically recoup the lost cost on our on-reservation infrastructure?
So this is Bob Wolf again. We're well aware of the cost issues that are being experienced currently. And we're working very carefully with Brent Esplin, the regional director in Billings, and his staff to try to look at that very carefully and looking at what can be done as far as looking at the indexing and try to update that information. Carrie Durall in the policy office is also on. I don't know if she has anything she would like to add.
Sorry, no, Bob, I think you covered that well. Yeah, it's a known concern for sure.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Bob. Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for one more question. If you have one additional question, we can try and address that. Any additional questions, Peter?
No additional questions at this time, Rob.
Okay. Well, again, thank you. And thank you for your very insightful questions, and many thanks to all of our subject matter experts that have presented information during each one of our information sessions. On behalf of the Bureau of Reclamation, thank you for attending today's session. We're dedicated to transparency throughout the implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure law. And although this is the final scheduled information brief with tribes, updated information is always available at usbr.gov/BIL, BIL, for the playback of all information sessions, including this one, the topics covered in those briefs. And as mentioned, once our spend plan is transmitted to Congress, we'll post that and a news release on that website. So thank you, and thanks again for your partnership, and thank you for your support.